Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Man, so excited that you guys are here for the Simplified Church podcast. Let me tell you what, we're having a great time in the studio already before we even started recording this. Just man, laughing, connecting. And man, it's a special episode. And I can't wait for you guys to meet our guest that we have today, Alex with worshipministrytraining.com. He is the founder and man, creative arts pastor extraordinaire. And so we are excited to jump into some conversations with him today, talking about the practical reality of, man, a lot of us in ministry, we don't have these deep benches of staffing or these multi-staff environments. You guys know you guys are in the trenches, you're everyday pastors just like us. And we recognize that sometimes we just need those resources, those extra opportunities that we can bring along to some of the part-time staff we have, some of even the full-time guys, but not well resourced guys and gals that are out there, and put some tools in their hands. And so, we love to do that here on this show. And I promise you by the end of today's episode, and this is no pressure on you, Alex, but I promise you by the end of today's episode, you're going to feel far more equipped, more resourced, and you're going to be running to your browser to get over to worshipministrytraining.com to hear more about what these guys got going on and how they can resource. But before we jump into all the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of today's conversation, I got to check in on my guy. I got to see Greg. How you doing, my man? What's new in your world? You've had a busy morning.
Oh man, it's been a busy morning, but that's not a terrible thing. Our fall has kicked off and is in full swing, and so our ladies Bible study group kicked off this morning, and so I had to do a little tech helping for them and get them off and running, and trying to do all the Thursday things. So things are good. It's been a wild few days, but excited to get to chat with you all today and talking about something that I am incredibly passionate about, in seeing folks develop into worship leaders and providing them the resources that can help them do what they do so well. And so I'm super excited to get to have this conversation and learn a little bit more about our friend Alex and what they do at Worship Ministry Training. But Mike, how are things in the great state of Ohio? What's going on today, man?
Listen, I don't know how like Gen Alpha took the state of Ohio and made it to be something weird, because it's not. Ohio's beautiful country. I'm gonna tell you right now. Okay. Now listen, things here in the 513 have been going okay. We've had a rocky start to the NFL season. All right. The Bengals have
The
they
who?
showed up and then they immediately quit. It was bad.
Who?
Uh, listen, don't you come at me with this who nonsense. At least my city still has a team. St. Louis is so terrible that
You're
they've
not wrong.
lost NFL teams twice. Okay, so
You're not wrong.
let's just be honest about it. But you guys do have you got a Super Bowl out of it to at least hang your hat on. We do not. We have a couple appearances, but man, things have been good. Getting into the fall as well.
I
Love it. Love pumpkin spice latte season, which I
yeah.
thoroughly enjoy.
So I have to ask: have you had any Alf sightings in your neighborhood?
Alex, if you don't know what he's talking about, there's been some nonsense, some tomfoolery afoot up in Springfield, Ohio, where I don't, and listen, this is not the podcast for this, but I don't know if this is true or not, but apparently there's been reported disappearances of like family pets, like cats, dogs, and they're potentially being eaten by a migrant community that has been placed there. I don't know if any of that is true, but it is making it is making like national headlines. I'm gonna pray to God that it's not true. But the Alf memes as a result of this,
Are
they're on point.
hilarious.
And I
Oh,
cannot
oh, because Alf
listen.
eats pets, right?
Yeah, he eats that cat. He's always gotta get the cat, and he's always
I
trying to put
gotcha.
it on two pieces of bread. And so, man, oh man, the internet has been on fire
That's
the past
hilarious.
week. It is. But
I
things are
uh
good.
I have been well, no one's actually said this to me, but sometimes I think about myself and I say I kind of look like Alf. Like I got a big nose and bushy eyebrows, kind of hairy, so
Man, you put us in a position where we possibly couldn't comment on that.
yeah, you
So,
can.
I mean, you listen. The Lord made you; He loves you, and and gosh darn it, everyone else likes you too. But no, things are good, man. We're excited here. Alex, where do you hail from these days, my man? Are you where you calling
I'm
from?
still in Los Angeles. I have, born and raised here. I did spend a couple of years overseas on the mission field, and then a couple of years up north in Northern California, and then back down in SoCal for like the last 7 or 8 years. So Los Angeles, we just had a 5.1 earthquake this morning. So yeah,
What?
yeah,
Did you? Yeah,
100,
I saw the alert come through.
yeah,
What was that like? Did you feel it?
yeah. A little rumble in my seat. I was kind of writing some notes for this interview and kind of just prepping my mind and my heart, and is rumbling around. I was like, I better go check on my kids, and they're all still fast asleep, so we're all good. Yeah.
That boy, that's a weird thing to try to get used to.
I mean, it doesn't happen often, very, very rarely.
Man, that's wild. Okay, well, Los Angeles, man. So we've got the coasts almost here represented. So that's pretty exciting. Man, I'm again super thankful that you are here to be a part of this conversation. I would like for our listeners to just get to know you a little bit. Again, we do everything we can, almost to a point where we probably overshare. But we like to make sure that folks know that, man, we're accessible, we're relatable, we're just everyday dudes who love Jesus and love the church and love the work of the church. And I get that sense from you. So, man, tell us a bit about yourself and your journey and where you are.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep it short because I think most people are like, I don't really care, just help me out, but
Yeah.
but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I've been a worship leader, worship pastor since I was 18, and I'm 39. So, quite a long time, 21 years. And started in a youth band like most kids, and then kind of grew into more leadership roles, and eventually, leading. I've led in churches as a worship pastor from the 100 in size all the way up to 10,000 in size, which was my last church. And my current church is about like 1,200 in size. So I've led on the mission field as well for 2 years overseas. So
Wow.
I've kind of led in multiple contexts, and that really helped me to see what is actually important, and what works across multiple denominations, styles, contexts, languages, even like what are the core aspects of a vibrant, healthy worship ministry. And so I started teaching worship leaders around me, and then eventually started putting that content online. And then it kind of grew it's been about 10 years now since the first podcast episode went live. And so it's just kind of slowly evolved into now we have like a full-on training academy online for worship leaders all over the world. So I still am involved in my local church as a worship pastor, creative arts communications kind of overseer, and leading every week, and then doing as much as I can for worship ministry training to equip worship leaders all over the world. Because, and I think this is the big why, it's like, most worship leaders get thrown into ministry with zero formal training. Like literally they were gifted at music, and the pastor needed someone and said, hey, you're it, like, go do the thing. And they're like, well, what's the thing? I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. And just get up there and sing. But it's such a more vital role than just get up there and sing. And so, I want to come alongside of worship leaders and help them understand the importance of their role, and then practically how to succeed at that role, in terms of the administration side, the leadership side, the pastoral side, musical side. I mean, there's so many hats that you have to wear as a worship leader. And so really helping them understand the importance of the role, the value of the role, but then equipping them to do the role well and really build a thriving worship ministry. Because the health of the worship ministry and, the musical communing with God that happens in a service is very, very vital to the health of the local church as a whole. And so we want to make sure that we get that right, So that's a little bit about me.
Man, that's fantastic. Okay, so you've had this, sounds like an incredible like career of varying different opportunities and scopes and sizes, and man, experiences that really have kind of led you to this place of, I just really want to equip people to do this well. I love that. Greg, from your perspective, when you hear what he's talking about with like how essential it is for people to have these tools and resources, how has that played out for you as a worship leader in a very different kind of context?
Sure. Yeah, I think that being able to have at your disposal some of those things, like I think back to when I was, a teenager, leading the student band, and then jumping into my first church, and I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mm.
And now looking back and saying, man, I wish that someone had put something in my hands so that I could have led that group better, and led that church better, and put more emphasis on things like, yeah, what we sing, it matters. Like
Mm.
one of the things that I think it's a hard thing to hear for most preaching pastors, but I think it's 100% true. The overwhelming majority of our congregations do not remember a single thing that you said in your sermon after
Yeah.
you leave,
Yeah, it is hard to hear.
but they will remember the songs that we sing.
That's true.
Because there's just something about what music does to the mind and the heart, and connecting those two things that causes us to recall. It's why we teach
Mhm.
our kids the alphabet by singing a song. It's why music just is a great way for us to remember and rehearse the things that we know to be true. And so, yeah, I think we can't overestimate and overemphasize the importance of ensuring that our worship leaders are skilled. And I think the other piece of the puzzle is ensuring that our worship leaders, yeah, they may not have the training that we'd like for them to have on the side um, of actual competency of being a worship leader, but also they may need the training on being a theologian. Because we need to
Oh,
ensure
yeah.
that those two pieces are coming together, and that they are leading with excellence in their craft, but also ensuring that we are protecting the core theology and doctrine that we hold to.
Mhm.
And so that's huge. And I think training and resourcing worship leaders may be one of the most important things that we can do for the future of the church.
Yeah,
Man.
Greg, if I could jump on that, I would say that the senior pastor is the primary disciple maker in your church, but your worship leader, worship pastor is a close second, because they are shaping people's theology through the songs, through the times of corporate worship. Like the corporate worship gathering is a formative experience. It's a disciple making experience. And so how we do what we do, why we do what we do, the intention that we put behind everything that happens in a service matters. And so you really want not just some goofy kid up there. I mean, it's fine if that's what you got, but like invest into them, develop them, help them
Yeah.
to grow on that musical side, but yes, that shepherding side, that pastoral side, because what we don't need is more musicians, we need more shepherds. And so really developing that spiritual side of your worship leader is super critical as well. And then of course all the competency stuff as well. So
Man, I love that. We need more shepherds, not just more musicians. That that'll preach, man. That's heavy. In the scope of worship ministry training, where does that fall into the overall offering and way that you can help guys be kind of molded and shaped and resourced in that space?
sure. Yeah. So worship ministry training, we haven't defined it, but it's an online academy for worship leaders. And so we have, tools, training, and then live coaching. And so some of the tools that we give the worship leaders are obviously some theological training, some foundational training, but we give them like team devotions to lead their team spiritually. We give them resources to help them have those shepherding, corrective conversations, those types of things. And so we're giving them, the musical training as well, of course, but we do focus a lot on like you are a shepherd of your team, and then beyond that, helping them understand how they can use intentional song selection, like how do they evaluate a worship song, how do they make sure that the songs that they're singing are biblical, clear, God-centered, singable, all these things. And so we teach them how to think about these things. And then to implement them, with we have like done for them documents and resources that they can take and use in their ministry. So all the things I've learned over the last 21 years of leading in multiple contexts, we've created like systems that they can just take and then put your church's name on the system and use it at your church. So it's like done for them templates.
Man, that's fantastic. How have you seen that just personally, um, investing this time into other guys, other worship leaders? Like, what have you seen as kind of the win, the payoff of that? Like what stood out to you in your experience over the years of these? Maybe you've got one or two stories or one of, a couple of examples where you're like, man, I got to be a part of seeing this shape this person or affect their ministry or their church in such an incredible way. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the goal for all of us as church leaders, right? Is to invest ourselves into others so that they can succeed. And there's no greater joy, right? Like, is it John that says that, or Paul that says that I have no greater joy than to see my children? I think it's John. So that's the heartbeat that we should all carry. But yeah, I do. When you brought it up, I thought of one student recently that I had an interaction with. Her name's Alicia. She's out in Texas, and she started out being thrust into worship ministry as a piano teacher, and eventually was put in charge. And now it's like, what do I do? And so watching her develop and grow and be able to like get clarity on the vision for the ministry, the direction it needs to go, how to get there. She said, I knew where it needed to go kind of, but now I know exactly how to get there. And I have the tools to do so. And then to see her develop her team, and she was like investing into her team all the way up until her last day at that church, because she actually got hired at a different church now, because she's become such a great leader. And so it's just been cool to see her journey and see. I think the biggest win for me is like, not only am I getting the honor and privilege of investing into a worship leader, but that's impacting that local church. And then that local church is impacting the community. And so it's very multiplicative in its impact, where it's like, when we invest well into our leaders hit their teams, our teams hit the church hits the community. And then you're like, wow, like this is how we change the world, or God changes the world through us, So.
Man, I love that. That's you're exactly right. Like those are the stories that we long for, that we kind of pine for when we are investing, and we do see a tangible payoff in that. Greg, when you think about the challenges that you have in a man, look, you wear a ton of hats, dude. Like it's just that's just the reality. Let's just recap real quick, okay? So full-time worship leader, and then full-time administrator, right? And then full-time tech support, as we've learned today, right? A full-time problem solver. When you think about all these different hats that you wear, and you look at your team, and you think, here are some things that I can kind of identify. Being able to identify where we, kind of where we want this team to go. I'm curious to hear from both of you guys. Like, how do we help, especially emerging worship leaders, guys and gals that really want to go to this next level. They want to grow in their craft. They really want to get better at this. What are some of the things that they need to identify or be able to identify to know where to start? Because that can be an overwhelming process. What's that look like for you, Greg?
So I think one of the first things that I would be saying to them to say, hey, be looking at would be I would be looking at, how am I developing my relationship with the preaching pastor? Because that's going to drive a ton of what we do or don't do across the board. And so figuring out, how do I develop that relationship? And then have honest conversation and assessment about who the players already are. Like who's on the team already. Because I think sometimes we fall into the trap of, we see what other people are doing and we think, man, that's great, I think I can do that. But we've not done the hard work of assessing where we are right now to then begin to take those steps to get there. And so I would figure out what I'm working with, what my resources are, and then begin to try to develop a plan from there to say, okay, I see that I have, I have 3 vocalists, and I have a keyboard player, and I have a bass player. But I don't have anything else as far as musicians go. Okay, how can I work with that? Or, any number of things, and know where I am, and then begin to work a plan that says, okay, so how do we take this and move it forward? And then be able to do that in bite-sized steps. Because I think that's the other thing that can be really, really frustrating and discouraging, is seeing how massive the project can be and being overwhelmed by it. And so you just don't do anything.
Right.
And so trying to assess that first step.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. That's for sure. So, one of the things that I was thinking when you were asking that question, Mike, was um, exposure. Like people need to be exposed to things that they aren't aware of in order to see what it could be. And so I think for a lot of worship leaders, they're in their little bubble and they think like, I don't know what to do. I don't even know what to work on. But then when you get around other worship leaders who are doing other things or different approaches for accomplishing their role, like you see what could be, and then you're like, oh, okay, I wasn't even aware that was a thing. I should be
Yeah.
working on that. I should be investing in that. And so, one of the things that I can offer to your pastors listening is I have a free course. It's called the 8 Essentials of a Thriving Worship Ministry. And what they can do is it's like 5-minute videos, and there's 8 of them. They can watch those with their worship leader, and they can learn, okay, how are we doing in this area? How are we doing in this area? And it gives not just each area, but it gives like action steps that they can work on to take steps forward in each area. So I can make that available to your audience. It would be worshipministrytraining.com/essentials, because it's called 8 Essentials. So worshipministrytraining.com/essentials, and they can get that free course. They just put their email in, and then they can watch that with their worship leader, start having a dialogue about those things, and that will expose them to that bigger view of what ministry could look like.
Man, that's fantastic. It's cool when we sometimes have these tangible, like first step opportunities of here's something you can do right now that it can just get the ball rolling and starting that conversation, especially when you're talking about that relationship with the lead pastor, the lead person. Greg, you've mentioned already that having that relationship be good and well established, communication being open is important. How would you describe the relationship that you have as a worship leader with your lead pastor? I mean, what's that dynamic like?
Yeah. So, I think if he was saying or sitting here in the room, he would agree with this statement. I think we work together well. We're friends. But it's a little bit unusual in that, I have something on, a lot of worship leaders in that I'm also the administrator. And so that gives me a different ability to sometimes say things that another worship leader couldn't say.
Okay.
Just as far as, because I have tentacles out in lots of other areas of ministry. And so sometimes I'm able to say really hard things that another worship leader that was their only responsibility probably wouldn't be able to say or do or get away with. And so it kind of makes for an interesting relationship with that, and knowing how to leverage that is a very different thing than anywhere else that I've been. And so, but I think because of that, when I'm able to say, okay, this is one of those moments when I'm taking off the administrator and I'm just putting on the worship leader hat, and I just want to have a conversation about where are we going? What are we doing as it pertains to corporate gatherings for worship? Where are we going? Where are we hoping our people will be? I think those are some of the sweetest moments that we have, to be able to really press into the opportunity to shepherd not only each other, but the congregation that God has entrusted to us. And so I think we have a good relationship, and
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that God has positioned me with pastors who have been patient and kind, let me make lots of mistakes and fail forward, as a friend of mine likes to describe it. So I've been grateful for those opportunities, but they take work, and they're two-sided.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, for sure.
worship leader, you got to go out of your way to build that relationship. But pastor, at the same time, you are going to have to show that you're interested, and make time and do those things that are just super important. Because I don't know that there is any relationship more important on a staff team than the relationship between the primary preacher and teacher and the primary worship leader. If there's problems there are going to be problems everywhere.
Wow. So Okay, Alex. So I want you to speak to this, but from a maybe a two-pronged question. The first prong of that would be like how do we help foster that great relationship between preaching pastor, lead pastor, worship leader, and then second part of that second prong would be how do we do that when sometimes the perception can be that the lead pastor could be more organizationally minded, more theologically minded, kind of in that stereotype maybe a little bit, and worship leaders could be more artistic and emotional and maybe fall into that stereotype a little bit. Now of course that's not always I mean, look at Greg. I mean, he's a stone wall. He has zero emotion. Look at this guy. I mean, he's a brick house, but in the off chance that you've got that
Thank you
kind
for
of
that
dynamic.
earworm. I
I know
appreciate
it.
that.
I heard it too.
There's a bass line in my head right now.
No.
But in that space, like how do you help bridge that divide when sometimes that's a true classification of dynamics.
Yeah. Well, I want to start by reaffirming what Greg said, that the senior pastor worship leader relationship has to be unified, because you are the two most visible people in the church. Let's say the senior pastor gets 60% of the time on stage, your worship leader's up there 40% of the time in front of the people. And the enemy loves to divide. And so we have to endeavor to keep the unity of the bond of peace. Keyword endeavor, right? So it's effort, it's active, it's intentional. It's setting aside like weekly time to be together. Even though both of you are busy, there is no greater relationship to foster within your staff team than those two, especially in a smaller church staff, right? And I think that's the primary core of this audience, maybe not, but you really want to be on the same page. And so I would say, I can't recall all the details of your question, but I'm just going to go down my rabbit trail here. I think you should meet together weekly with your worship leader for multiple things: relational connection, relational investment, relational just like loving and serving one another, knowing one another, praying together. Many worship leaders and senior pastors do not even pray together. So start on the relational side, but also then logistically, like you can review last week's sermon or service. You can talk about the upcoming service. Both, especially the worship leader, should be submissive and humble to the desires of the lead pastor, because he is the leader that God has placed over the ministry. That doesn't mean he should domineer, but he should serve, right? Just like Jesus says, the best leaders are servants. So senior pastor, don't be like, I'm in charge. You should serve your worship leader. So, relationally, and then praying together, and then planning together, reviewing together, talking through trouble spots. But then I think one of the ways that senior pastors can help worship leaders is you should care about them as a person, right? Not just as a function that they fulfill. And so helping your wild, crazy, unorganized worship leader grow in the practical areas of developing, systems and a budget, and even a personal budget, or time management, or here's how you keep track of all your tasks. And so, hey, I want to invest in you. I want to care about you as a person. I want you to succeed in life beyond the walls of this church. Can I share with you some things that have helped me to be more organized? And if you take that pastoral shepherding role with your worship leader and care about them as a human, I think they will appreciate that. And so you're kind of like winning trust, but you're also helping them grow. And so both of you win on that, weekly connect, if you can do that.
I think that's awesome advice. I mean, I hear you saying, Greg, that there's like clear practical dividends that come from that level of investment. I think that's fantastic. How do you, practically begin that if, let's say you got a guy that's new, he's a new LP on staff, and there's already an established worship person, and just relationally, that they don't have that capital formed yet, and personality wise, they're very different. Like, what does that look like to then begin to get them on the same page? And how does, and what advice would you have for them, Alex, in that process? And then, is there anything within the offerings of worship ministry training that helps, spark those kind of conversations?
Yeah. I mean, so I'll be full disclosure. I left my last church because a new senior pastor came in, and we were not on the same page.
Okay.
I didn't leave immediately. I waited 2 years, but I did end up leaving. And so sometimes that's just the reality. Like, a senior leader comes in, he has his vision, he wants to do it his way, and he's not willing to, work with the people who are there or be collaborative. He's like, this is my thing, this is my vision. And if that's the case, like sometimes you're like, well, that's not my vision. I'm not going to work in that environment, right? And so I think we have to be realistic about that. And in many cases for the senior pastor, that's a blessing. They're like, great, that person's gone. Now I can pick the guy that I want who has this, I can form into. So I think it depends on the temperament of the senior leader, because some senior leaders are just going to come in and bulldoze to get their way. But I think personally, I don't think that's very biblical. I think a better way is to work with the people God has placed in that church to develop what God wants to develop from within those people. So with all that said, if the senior leader has that mentality of I'm going to come in and work with the people, then I think you just have to intentionally work to build that relationship and go to lunch and if the worship leader has a family, have them over to the pastor's family's house for dinner, and really just go out of your way to establish those ties, those connections between these two very upfront primary people. And in terms of in the academy, do we have material? We cover a lot of topics in the academy, and we do weekly coaching calls, and so a lot of these things come up in like just naturally. But I don't have a specific training on how to get along with your senior pastor, but maybe I need to create one.
Not yet.
So, yeah, for sure.
No, that's awesome, man. And I recognize that you can't do this one size fits all approach when you're talking about something like so subjective as relationships. But right. I think this is good advice from a couple of guys that have been in that seat and understand that this, if we're saying that this relationship is the most important relationship or one of the most important relationships in the staff dynamic, then we got to be doing what we can to honor that as best we can, which I think is cool. Shifting gears a little bit, when you look at the sum total of all of the varying worship leaders, worship pastors, creative arts folks that you've served and come alongside and resourced, what do you think is like some of the biggest needs that have kind of been represented when folks kind of enter into this space of I need some help? Worship ministry training is going to be a good offering for me, a good solution for me. What are some of those kind of common needs that exist that kind of show up at your doorstep?
Mm-hmm. Two come to mind right off the top. One is organization. They need help getting their ministry streamlined and organized because they don't know, like they don't have an audition process. They don't have onboarding documents for volunteers. They don't have a good weekly flow or schedule, and their scheduling is chaos, right? And so that organizational piece, a lot of people are like, thank God we found your templates, because now we just take it and we're like, one lady said, you saved me 5 months of work of having to create these documents myself. I was like, cool, you're welcome. Yeah, you just got a half a year back. And then the other side that people come in for, or that they really value once they're in, is the community. Because right now we have over 1,400 worship leaders in the academy, and like they just love knowing that they're not alone. I think it's a very isolating role as a worship leader. And I think pastors too, like if pastors had the equivalent of the Worship Ministry Training Academy, I think they'd be stoked to be able to hop on a call on Mondays and be like, here's how my service went. My sermon bombed. I feel super discouraged. And then to have other pastors like build them up, like that's so valuable. So those two things really come to mind. But I think other key issues are like, obviously a lot of people struggle with musical excellence. They're like, man, my band sounds like trash. Like I can't sing well. So we do address all of that in our different courses. And then another one is team dynamics. Like I've got a lot of people come in really struggling with like a bad team member or bad culture, or like people aren't showing up prepared. And so team culture is also a huge need that I see. And really all that boils down to is leadership. Like, is there a clear leader who's going to be a strong, clear leader and be like, not mean clear leader, but like, hey guys, let's create a culture. Is he or she is the worship leader a culture maker? Are they someone who is really fostering that culture and protecting that culture and guarding culture? And I always say culture is created by what you celebrate and what you tolerate. So if you celebrate the good, you're going to have good culture. But if you tolerate bad behavior, you're going to have bad culture. And so you got to cut out the bad and you got to celebrate the good, and you'll have a stronger team and a healthier, culture. And you can apply that to the pastors listening too, for your staff. Even if it's just 2 of you or 3 of you, like, are you leading the way as a culture maker and demonstrating what you want from the rest of your team by all of your behavior, by all of the words? Yeah, I've heard too that culture is like all of the many micro actions added up. Like all of the tiny things you say, how you treat people, your temperament, all of that stuff adds up, and that creates the culture. So
Wow. Yeah. That's beautifully stated. And I think Greg, you may have just given us another episode idea to jump down on, because that, I tell you what, man, that is when you spell it out like that, that's powerful. And I think that there's a lot that we could really dive deep into on that. For you, Greg, have you come alongside other worship guys that are, you know, they've not found worshipministrytraining.com. They don't have this incredible resource at their fingertip, but they're looking for development. They're looking for help. What's that been like for you?
Yeah. So most of the interactions that I have had in this realm, they lean much more on the community side than on the competency sides.
Okay.
And so much more that, like, I lead a cohort of worship pastors. There are about 8 of us. And we try to connect at least once a month and just talk about life and try to eliminate the isolation. And so I think that's huge. And whether it's guys that you see face to face and are in person with, or they're folks that you are connecting through a resource like worship ministry training or whatever, I think there is huge value in that. And then, I think the other thing that right now seems to be what I'm hearing from all of the worship leaders that I'm connected with is, man, how do we do our live stream better? And how do we translate the folks that we are connecting with virtually into an in-person connection?
Ooh.
And I don't always have great answers to those questions. But I think that's kind of where most of the guys that I'm interacting with right now from the worship scene, those are the questions that they're asking, and they're desperately looking for those relationships with people who understand.
Man, yeah. And those are huge questions. And really, like, there's a lot of folks right now that are wrestling those questions. And I don't know, Alex, if you jump into that kind of, stuff within like your particular offerings, but having a spot like coaching and cohorts and these groups that can form so that like these kind of conversations can be workshopped a little bit and can have some group think around, I think are incredible. I think working and fighting against isolation that's something that's near and dear to our heart with this show. On the regular, we talk about that. The way that ministry has shrunk to a place where most guys feel like they're so alone, or most gals feel like they're so alone, is truly heartbreaking. And so, Alex, if you could just, in talking about the value of like the coaching and getting onto a call and getting to some community in that way, other than just finding resources and tips and tricks and tools to make the job more palatable or effective, what are you seeing in terms of the overall benefit of the community piece, and how that's bringing life to those particular guys and gals that are jumping on those calls?
yeah, well, it's actually really cool because yesterday, it's the second time this has happened. There was a community call about a specific topic that I was not even attending. I wasn't even there. I didn't teach any of it. I just, the community served the community, and it was about choirs in worship. It was a girl who she was asking, hey, how do you guys handle choirs? And then a couple girls said, oh, we do this at my church. And then the girl said, would you be willing to hop on a call and answer some questions? And then another girl said, can I join the call? And then I just said, hey, I can create an event. Do you guys want to just have a group discussion? I did. And there was like 15 people that just jumped on a call like together to talk about how to do choirs better in worship. So it's like amazing to see the body serving the body. And like,
Yeah.
I'm a passive spectator at that point, and that's the second. But yeah, and then we also have forums in our community. So like if people post a question, we get like 2 or 3 posts per day of a different topic. And then, people jump on that topic and share their experience or help with that. And in terms of the live stream piece, I agree. That's a huge problem for many churches. We're doing a live stream review. We do it like every trimester. We do a live stream review where they submit their live streams, and we will watch a portion of them, and then on a live call, I will break down like leadership ways they can grow, musical ways they can grow, production ways they can grow, all of it. So that's something that we do on a trimesterly basis, and then we're going to actually create a live streaming course because, like you said, Greg, that's like a huge thing on people's radar right now. So yeah, it's
Wow.
cool to be able to like in real time react to the needs of the worship leaders.
Yeah, and it's neat that you're set up to do that, because not a lot of organizations are set up to do that. A lot of it's just very much, like, hey, go to our YouTube page and there's 16, 1700, 8-minute videos that you can watch at your leisure. It's like, okay, well, and nobody has that kind of time. But to be able to like crowdsource it and get some community built around something right away, that can be very life-giving and can create some relationships outside of just those coaching calls, where you might have somebody who's 6 states away, but man, you're really bonding over, like, it seems like you're asking a lot of the questions I'm asking, and that can create connection that can be so valuable. I do want to ask you, Alex, just from you've talked a lot about this like human side of things, that man, we are to love, we are to shepherd, we're actual real people in these roles, and I can sense your heartbeat with that in a huge way. What I'd love for us to do as we kind of land the plane here is, and this is to some degree putting you on the spot maybe, but just talking about like from your heart, from like your experience and background, and the relationships that you formed, conversations you've had, things that you've seen. You get a you get an unresourced or under resourced worship leader who's exhausted, tired, at the end of their rope, and just they maybe they're thinking about maybe cashing in on this thing, that they're going to find something else to do. You know, still lots of ways to serve the body, but not, I don't need this headache. And they come across your table and they want to have a conversation. How would you encourage that everyday in the trenches worship leader? How would you encourage them? How would you build them up? How would you, invite them to keep fighting the good fight?
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity. And I pray someone out there actually hears these words who needs to hear them. What you do is so incredibly valuable. There is nothing more important than helping another human worship their creator. And you and I get the privilege of doing that every single week. And yes, it's a battle. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's discouraging sometimes. Yes, people say mean things, but Paul says he's filling up what's lacking in Christ's affliction. It's part of ministry is suffering, and Jesus himself suffered to save us. And so we should be willing to say, Lord, I don't like it. It's hard, but you own my life, and I will take the suffering if I can help other people in my church love you more passionately and more deeply and more wholeheartedly. And so really, what you do, worship leader, is the highest, most valuable thing that we get the privilege of doing on the planet, is helping another human worship their creator. And so don't grow weary in doing good, but trust the Lord, in all these things, and believe that he's working even when you don't see it. Sometimes we don't see the people's hands going up in the air or them singing passionately, but they're sitting quietly in their seat, and the Holy Spirit is ministering deeply into their heart and bringing them back from the brink of divorce, or bringing them back from jumping into a life of sin, or we don't know the things that God's doing in our people's hearts each week while we lead them in these truth-filled songs. And so we will not know until we get to eternity the impact that you've had. And so just keep your eyes on the Lord and keep doing the right thing. And I would say too, if a worship leader is in a place that's not a great fit for them spiritually, really pray and ask the Lord. And I would say fasting really works. Fast and ask the Lord, do you want me to step out of this particular church body? Because honestly, there are unhealthy churches out there. And so I think we need to be realistic about that as well. And then I guess the last piece that I would share to a struggling worship leader is make sure you're resting. Make sure you're praying in the mornings and putting the Lord first in all things, and delete TikTok from your phone and Instagram from your phone. Like, please, dear God, like delete that crap and just spend time with God in the mornings and go on a prayer walk every morning. I guarantee you, your soul will feel more alive, and you'll have a better perspective and more joy as you go out and serve the Lord. So make sure you're resting and spending time with God. So those are just some thoughts there.
Man, that last piece, Greg, that I know that it's like kind of targeted toward the struggling worship leader, but holy smokes, that'll preach to everybody right now. You know, I love that, man. Greg, I want you to piggyback on that. Like,
Mhm.
you know, as a guy that's in the trenches in a very different kind of, you know, capacity to a large degree and culture. How would you encourage that? You know, because I'm not in that seat, man. I've put my time in as a worship leader. I'm not going back. You know what I mean? I did my time there. That's not for me. Um, but you're in that seat too, man. And you guys have similar passions, similar heartbeats, but in very different situations. How would you encourage somebody in that seat?
Yeah, I would echo all of the things that Alex just said, and I would just encourage you, man, don't quit, um, because it's worth it.
Mm,
Even when it's hard in the moment, it's worth it. Brian Croft um, posts, I think, almost every morning, every Monday morning on his social media feeds. Hey, Pastor, it's Monday morning. Don't resign. Don't quit.
yeah,
Go for a walk, talk with Jesus, have a good cup of coffee. I think there's great advice in that. And sometimes we need that advice every day. Hey, don't quit today. Have a good
yeah,
cup of coffee, talk to a friend, and know that that God has you where you are on purpose, and that you are making impact, even if you don't see that you are.
man. That's both of you guys. I love your heartbeat for this. And what I think is so special, Alex, with worship ministry training is that it's not just about providing this service, offering these solutions. It is so obvious, and I pray it's obvious to everyone that listens to this episode, that what you're doing is more about like resourcing and caring for the soul of the person that is in this spot where they're trying to be resourced to be more effective at what they do, and not just simply about here's a bag of tools that'll be $100 a month, thank you, and moving on. This is holistic, man. And that's why I was so excited to talk to you, because I sense this pursuit of care for the person while they care for their people. And and care sometimes comes in many forms, in many ways, but creating community, you know, forums, opportunities and space for conversation to happen, free resources, man, saving people months of time. That man, what a gift that is, for so many folks that, you know, man, I've got 4 kids, you know, I'm busy, you know, and so if I can save some time and be more effective, so I really appreciate what you do and the heartbeat behind it. And I'm so thankful that we've had this chance to spend some time talking with you, and not just promoting, but really encouraging. I'll go so far to say I'm begging all of our listeners, head over to that website, take a look, get some of those free resources, start some of these conversations with folks on your team, and see what the Lord might do with it. Because I think that there's tremendous value in what Alex and his team are offering. So super appreciate you being here, man, and spending some time enlightening us. And for everybody else, if you've benefited from today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can head over to simplifychurch.com. Shoot us an email. Let us know. Pretty simple, podcast at simplifychurch.com. We'd love to hear from you, as always. And as many of you do, we certainly appreciate your feedback. We'd love for you to continue to rate and review the show. That helps us get out in front of as many pastors just like you as humanly possible. So that's a simple way to give back to the show. And of course, Greg is always taking checks. And so if you want to just write him a check, you know, Greg is, you know, he'll take them. It's no problem.
Hey, I got 3 kids.
I got mouths to feed, baby.
And Mike, just can I clarify? It's not
Yeah.
$100 a month. Praise God. It's only $22 a month if you pay annually. So there you go. Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Didn't even have to, at the buzzer. He got it in at the buzzer.
That's right.
I just didn't want
Yeah.
people to think I was a greedy pig.
No, gosh, no. People that listen to the show long enough know that I'm ridiculous on most fronts, and so I just throw out arbitrary numbers and try to beg people to pay Greg money, or the founder of our company. I'm always trying to get him to merchandise something.
That's right.
We've
And,
been
and could somebody help Mike out and get him a pumpkin spice latte? I mean,
Seriously.
really.
I'm not asking for a lot here. I think we give a lot to this community, you know. And a guy just says a PSL on the free. What are we talking about here? Okay, what, $6? Come on, people. We're having earthquakes out in LA. I'm just asking for a latte. Anyway, I certainly appreciate you guys. Connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure you send Alex a message. And if you want to know more about worship ministry training, head over to the website, worshipministrytraining.com, where you can set up a demo, get all the information that you need. Any other ways or opportunities that people can connect with you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think worshipministrytraining.com is the best way. And if they want that free course to watch with their worship leader, go to worshipministrytraining.com/essentials. But then, yeah, we're on Instagram and YouTube and all the stuff. We try to give a lot of free content out there to help people who just need some free help. So
fantastic. Thanks for listening, everybody. And as always, we'll see you next week.